So with the ending of Wano, we got a lot of huge bounty reveals, and it kind of put us into a sweet spot in the series where we have a good understanding of the top 20 highest bounties, because they all kind of just start with at least 1 billion. But also, we don't know all of the highest bounties yet, which is great because, you know, there's like still more stuff to learn, and I'll get into that towards the end of the video. But for now, I just want to go over the top 20, and that brings us to Jack, who has a bounty of 1 billion, and I'm pretty sure he was actually the first character revealed to have a bounty of 1 billion, and at the time it was like a huge deal, of course, but eventually we came to learn that Jack is more so just underwhelming, if anything. I mean, he is one of Kaido's all-stars and he's not a chump per se, but compared to the rest of these characters we're going to be going over, he's lackluster for sure. Number 19 is Sanji. He has a bounty of 1,032,000,000. This actually recently revealed in chapter 1058, and Sanji definitely deserves this. I mean, he did defeat Queen after all, another all-star of Kaido, and he's also clearly powerful enough and has enough notoriety to receive this amount for sure. And also, he's officially a Yonko commander under Luffy, so yeah, it makes sense to me. Number 18 is Katakuri. I think Katakuri was the second character possibly to be revealed with a bounty over 1 billion, and if any character deserves that, it certainly was Katakuri. If anything, I think his bounty might be a little low. I think he possibly deserves like a 1.2 or even like a 1.3 billion bounty. I mean, granted, he did lose to Luffy in Gear 4, but there was a lot of variables and circumstances in that fight, and for the most part, he was dominating Luffy. Hey, also guys, if you like my One Piece content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you just need a reminder, here you go. Number 17 is Jinbei. Just like Sanji, his new bounty was revealed in chapter 1058, and he has the same reasonings as Sanji for the most part of receiving this bounty, although he doesn't quite necessarily have the track record that Sanji has, because, you know, he didn't defeat an all-star, but I think Jinbei's power kind of speaks for itself. I'm sure he could have defeated Queen if he was pushed far enough, but also he has more notoriety and accomplishments in world than Sanji does, so I think 1.1 billion is very fitting for him. That brings us to number 16 with Zorro, who has a bounty of 1,111,000,000. Of course, this could be higher because after all, he did defeat King, the second to Kaido, and he, you know, he's freaking Zorro after all, but I think for now this is fitting, and I'm just really happy that he got at least a 1 billion bounty, which he is more so deserving of than the rest of the Straw Hats in my opinion. Number 16 is Queen. As we mentioned, he is one of the all-stars under Kaido and has some notoriety to himself with, you know, being the Plague and formerly working for Vegapunk and everything, and I think 1.3 is pretty fitting to him. He seemed to exhibit that much amount of power, although he was just ultimately defeated by Sanji's odd power-up that he received, which will ultimately be explained, you know, whatever was going on with him and Judge and his mom back in the day, but Queen kind of fell short, to be honest. I don't really think he showed his full capabilities. Number 14 is Marco with a bounty of 1,374,000,000. So this is worthy of him for sure because he was the right hand to Whitebeard, who we'll get to much later on in the video because he's, you know, one of the highest bounties ever. But we've seen plenty of Marco's power in Marineford and Wano, and he's very worthy of having this amount, but he's not necessarily like the super powerhouse that you would expect to have something this high. I would say this is more so a combination of power and notoriety, if anything, as to where with, you know, some of the other characters on this list, we could see that their power is more so indicates why their bounty is so high. That brings us to King in number 13 with a bounty of 1,390,000,000. King is a super powerhouse for sure. I mean, he's the right hand to Kaido after all, and he's also a Lunarian, implied to be possibly the last Lunarian alive at this point. And I do think that we saw most of his abilities against Zorro, more so that Queen was able to exhibit against Sanji. But if anything, maybe his bounty is a little lower than it should be, considering, you know, what he truly is, and maybe the world government isn't exactly fully sure of that at this point, even though they technically did have him captured at one point. But just considering that he's the right hand to Kaido, you think that he might be a little higher than that. Zonin from the future here, guys. So in chapter 1059, which came out after I made this video, we got two huge bounty reveals slash updates. The first being Boa Hancock, who technically should be in this spot right here, which is like 13 if we bump Jack to 21, because her new bounty is revealed to be 1,659,000,000. Yeah, that's pretty insane, but we've already discussed how there's been like a paradigm shift in these bounties coming out of Wano is especially huge because her original frozen bounty when she became a warlord was 80 million. And Zhoniin from the past is going to be talking about that with the character that's coming up next. But yeah, now Hancock has one of the highest bounties in the series, and I think she's deserving of this for sure. I mean, she's certainly powerful enough. Her Marimara no Mi and her beauty gives her like an unbelievable power set, like one of the strongest in the series probably. And of course, she's the leader of the Kuja Pirates and all of Amazon Lily, which is a considerably powerful force. I mean, it's not like the equivalent of a Yonko crew or something, but there are certainly no pushovers. So I think 1.6 billion is fitting for her for sure. Number 12 is Crocodile. I know, that's a big surprise, and this was also revealed in chapter 1058 after we found out that Crocodile was more or less the founder of the Cross Guild, the new big super group with Mihawk, Crocodile, and Buggy. And to be honest, I'm not really sure why his bounty is so high at this point, because his original frozen bounty was 81 million, and you know, we kind of saw how strong he was more or less in Marineford and of course in Alabasta, but there's a big discrepancy between those two eras of Crocodile, and considering that we really haven't seen him do anything post timeskip, it's possible that he's gotten much stronger since then, because I assume that that has to play into his bounty somewhat, right? It can't just be because he's a part of the Cross Guild with Mihawk. There has to be some kind of power aspect to him having a bounty of 1,965,000,000. And that brings us to number 11 with Blackbeard, who has a bounty of 2,247,600,000. So at this point, Blackbeard is the only character revealed to have a bounty in the 2 billions. But also, this seems kind of low at this point, right? I mean, he is a Yonko. And as we're going to see, there's like 3 other characters that aren't Yonkos that have bounties much higher than him. And I also don't think he's going to stay at this level for a while. There's going to be things that happen that increase it for sure. And I mean, granted, we haven't really seen him do much post timeskip, but we do know that he is like the only character, maybe the only person ever known to have 2 devil fruits, especially 2 of the most powerful ones with the Yami Yami no Mi and the Guruguru no Mi. And to be honest, I would really like to see Blackbeard's reaction to all of the new bounties being revealed, because I'm sure it's going to make him feel some indignation for, you know, not having a bounty that high anymore. And speaking of that, that brings us to number 10 and number 9, who I'm just going to group together here with Kid and Law. They both received a bounty of 3 billion after their efforts in Wano and taking down Big Mom. I think they're worthy of these bounties for sure. I mean, like I said, they did defeat Big Mom after all, cleanly for the most part. And technically, I guess that's more of an accomplishment than what Blackbeard had done in defeating like Whitebeard, who was old and on life support, of course, and he kind of came in at the end of the battle and cleaned up after he had already fought for a long time. And of course, winning the payback war against the remnants of the Blackbeard pirates. But I mean, Blackbeard has those fruits, and you know, Kid and Law only have their individual fruits and way less powerful crews than Blackbeard does. So I'm on board with them having 3 billion, but it just makes me keep going back to Blackbeard and how his bounty seems so underwhelming now. Speak of the devil, Zhoniin from the future here again. So let's talk about Blackbeard's new updated bounty, which we also got at chapter 1059, because it is now 3,996,000,000. And considering what we were just talking about, this is very warranted. And I think Oda realized that with his previously underwhelming bounty. And don't get me wrong, when the 2.2 billion was revealed for its time, it was pretty high and impressive. But as we've been talking about, things have changed since then. And now with his 3.996 billion bounty, it gives him the second current highest bounty in the series of characters who are confirmed to be alive. And it kind of should have always been this way, but you know, Oda's doing his own thing. And as for why it has suddenly jumped so high, I don't know why. He hasn't really done anything that the audience is aware of outside of what he does in chapter 1059, you know, invading Amazon Lily and trying to take Hancock's power and also kidnapping Kobe. But his bounty is revealed before he even kidnaps Kobe. So I guess this is legitimately just Oda realizing that, hey, I gotta bump his bounty up because it's a little too low given the state of things. Number 8 is Luffy. Just like the 2 formers, his bounty is 3 billion as well, coming out of Wano. But his accomplishment is way more significant considering he freaking soloed Kaido. Well, mostly. I mean, Kaido had fought a lot throughout that arc, especially towards the latter portion of it. But it was ultimately Luffy that took him down, obviously. And especially now that his bounty poster is updated with the picture of him in his Nika form, that more so makes him a pariah than anything, but I guess also the world government doesn't want to put too much notoriety on him because they kind of want to keep the whole Nika sun god thing under wraps. So I guess 3 billion is necessary for now, and also it's going to increase just like the rest of the Straw Hats as the series goes on for sure. Number 7 is Buggy with a bounty of 3,189,000,000. Of course, this is for the gag of it all. It was revealed recently that this was kind of a mistake. If anything, one of Buggy's followers made him seem to be the most notable on the poster of the Cross Guild, and it eventually just came to the point of where Mihawk and Crocodile thought it was probably just a good idea to make Buggy the mascot, if anything, so they can kind of work in the shadows while all of the heat goes on him. But it's still hilarious that Buggy not only has a bounty of 3.1 billion, but it's also higher than Luffy's. That brings us to number 6 with Mihawk, who has a bounty of 3,590,000,000. So yeah, I think this is pretty worthy of Mihawk. He's been hyped up since essentially the beginning of the series. He's been known as a rival to Shanks and is still currently known as the strongest swordsman in the world, and was recently touted to have more skill than Shanks. And I think that means just with the sword. I don't think he's stronger than Shanks overall, especially with hockey and all that stuff. But considering everything, I think this is fitting for Mihawk, who could easily be a Yonko if he wanted, but he himself said that he kind of just wants to live peacefully. And that brings us to the top 5 with Shanks, who has a bounty of 4,048,900,000. So while this is an incredible bounty, I still think this might be underselling Shanks if anything. I mean, he has such incredible hype that you'd think that he'd have like a bounty higher than Kaido's, which we'll eventually get to. But an aspect of this could play into whatever ties he has to the Gorosei and the world government possibly. Still, it's interesting that Shanks's bounty is lower than Big Mom and Kaido's. Maybe because they've been around longer possibly and have built up more of a track record. But I fully assume that Shanks is probably the strongest character that we're going to be talking about who is currently alive. And brings us to number 4 with Big Mom. Now, I'm not saying she's dead, but it's really unknown at this point. But she had a bounty of 4,388,000,000, which is, I think, very fitting for her. I mean, she had a crazy crew, crazy abilities, and just crazy power overall, and had an iron grip on a large part of the New World for a while before she was ultimately taken down by Kid and Law. And that brings us to number 3 with Kaido, who had a bounty of 4,611,100,000. So still don't know if he's completely dead or not. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow comes back along with Big Mom, but at this point he's, I don't know, assumed to be dead. But what really needs to be said about Kaido at this point? We pretty much know that, you know, he was said to be the strongest creature in the world and one of the strongest pirates ever, I guess, right? I mean, we saw what he did in Wano. It ultimately came down to Luffy having to awaken his plot armor in order to defeat him. No, I'm just kidding, but you know what I mean. Then we come to number 2 with Whitebeard. He had an insane bounty of 5,046,000,000. I think this was more so because of power, if anything. I mean, he was an ambitious pirate, but not as much as the other top pirates that we've seen, you know? Kind of just wanted to do his own thing, have his family, and just be a pirate. He wasn't really trying to like take over the world. He didn't even really want the One Piece. So I'm pretty sure this was just because he was such an insane powerhouse. I mean, we saw what he was doing at Marineford, and he was like half dead at that point. And then we come to number 1 with Roger, who has the highest bounty possibly ever, maybe, with 5,564,800,000. So there's multiple variables that go into this, of course. First of all, he's Gold D freaking Roger. I'm sure strength plays a large part in this because he's obviously one of the strongest pirates ever. It's really debatable who was stronger between him and Whitebeard, although it's more so implied Whitebeard was probably the strongest, but not by much maybe. But Roger, of course, found the freaking One Piece and had tons of forbidden knowledge, so that played a large part in it as well. So aside from everyone we just went over, I think there's 2 other characters that may have bounties at least 5 billion or more possibly. So the first one is Rox. So Rox was like the big bad of the world essentially 38 years ago, well, at least in the pirate realm. Sengoku said the ambition of Rox was to be the king of the world, and they opened hostilities directly against the world government like some kind of terrorist organization. And at the time, everyone had heard of the threat they posed. And let's not forget that Rox had freaking Whitebeard, Big Mom, and Kaido as his commanders. So only someone absurdly powerful would be able to recruit them and have them willingly be his underlings. But going further, Sengoku said the Rock's pirates were the strongest crew in the world, a rampaging force of evil that none had been able to stop until they were ultimately taken out by Garp, who had to team up with frigging Roger to ultimately take him down. So all of that makes me think that he probably had a bounty of at least 5 billion, if not even more than that. And hopefully it will eventually be revealed what his bounty was, because I think that's something that we all kind of want to know, right? And then the last person I want to talk about is Dragon. Dragon, of course, is known as the world's most wanted man, or something like that, depending on the translation you go off of, but it implies that he has the highest bounty, right? Because he's the most wanted. However, I'm not really sure if he even has a bounty, or I don't really know what's going on with him, because in the Road to Laptail Volume 4, we got this little data page that showed like the top 9 bounties, and on there, Roger was listed as number 1 with, you know, his crazy bounty, but Dragon isn't listed here at all. So either this was just kind of information put there in the interim, or it will be eventually revealed that Dragon does in fact have a bounty, and it is higher than Kaido's, who, you know, before this had the highest bounty of people who were alive, meaning that Dragon could also have a bounty of like 5 billion. I mean, he's not necessarily a pirate, but he still is wanted because, you know, he's the leader of the Revolutionary Army, one of the biggest direct threats to the world government, which is one of the biggest reasons why they put bounties on people in the first place. So I assume that he has to have a bounty, right? Or is Oda kind of just playing with us? Because if he is most wanted and you capture him, then what do you get for it? Is it kind of just like name your price? Not really sure, but let me know if you think Dragon has a bounty or not, and if he does, what do you think it is? But that's pretty much it for the video today, guys. Let me know what you think about this list in the comments, and if there's anyone that I forgot who you think will ultimately be revealed to have a bounty worthy of the top 20 here, let me know. And if you liked it, please give it a like, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.